Good morning and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining the latest in our Work Together Anywhere webinar program. This is just one of a series of practical webinars specifically designed to provide you with guidance and insights to navigate the challenges that organisations have had to face and continue to face over the last few months. Our objective, as always, is to help you prepare to be on a more agile footing than before, to be resilient and to be able to adjust no matter what the next challenge is that comes your way. So if you've joined us before, welcome back. If this is your first time, then an especially warm welcome. Now, if you're attending this particular webinar, it's because you want to hear more on the topic of hybrid working. And I can assure you that we've got some really great content to share with you. The topic of hybrid working is so broad that we've not attempted to cram everything into one webinar, but to split it across two separate events. So this is part one, and part two will follow on the 1st of July. You'll need to register again for part two, but I shall remind you of that towards the end of this webinar. The presenters today will share insights that relate to people, processes, and technology. They will reference engagement and productivity and the importance of a people-centric solution. The real essence of hybrid working is that work is something we do, not somewhere we go. And therefore, we need to address people and process issues, whether they be in a designated office, an alternate office, at home, or anywhere else for that matter. Ultimately, the needs of the people and the process can be addressed by solutions irrespective of place. Now, these Work Together Anywhere webinars have never been designed to specifically address COVID-19, but rather to help customers become more agile, flexible, productive, and efficient, whatever challenge comes up. Whether that's a break-in or vandalism, whether it's Brexit related, export challenges, new presidents, new trade agreements, train strikes, or simply bad weather. People and the organisations they work for are looking for solutions to be kept informed at all times, to remain productive and to be engaged in better working practices wherever they happen to be. Now, to get the most from this session, please submit any questions you'd like the presenters to address. You'll be able to get involved straight away with a poll question that will be opening shortly. And you never know, you may end up changing all the preparation that the presenters have made. So please also take 2 minutes at the end to answer a short survey. And finally, to access similar content, download the session handout. Now you can click the handout icon on the right-hand side of your screen and it will download for you. This next slide shows what you'll find on the handout. And one of the key messages of this webinar is to listen to what your people are saying about how they work productively. And you'll find the Conscious Workplace report is a great supplement with data on how people and organisations are thinking and feeling. There are 4 key findings, and I can quickly share these with you as they're all relevant to this webinar. Firstly, the number one challenge is happiness, motivation, and productivity. Then the legacy workplaces that we've been used to are no longer fit for purpose in many cases. And both communication workplace practices have changed. And finally, that technology can be both an enabler, but also a blocker. So it always needs to be deployed with planning and thought. So there's an on-demand webinar and a report, so you can find out specifically more about this, and details are on the handout. And on the subject of webinars, on our webinar hub, you can find details of the latest webinars on the calendar and about 20 additional on-demand webinars from the last few months. We've also got 2 ebooks covering both reimagining your workplace and agile and remote working, plus additional thought leadership specifically on the subject of hybrid working. So do help yourself to all this information. Get in touch with the account manager or via the email address right here if you want to talk through any of the issues that have been raised. As I said, all these details are on the session handout. Just click the handout icon on the right-hand side of your screen. So on this next slide, we're going to show you what the presenters are all addressing this morning: how to develop a people-centered hybrid working strategy, what hybrid means for trust, teamwork, and collaboration, how integrated workplace solutions can enable productivity, and what technology options are available to manage those workspaces more effectively. But do feel free to drop in your own questions or simply a point of view on anything you hear. Now, I mentioned at the start a poll, and this is your first opportunity to be involved. So fingers and mouse ready, please. Let's launch that poll question. The question is, how far are you in planning your hybrid working? A, we haven't started yet, but we need to urgently. B, we have a few elements of hybrid working in place, but there's a lot more to do. C, we're very close to being ready for hybrid working. We have 1 or 2 issues to resolve. Or D, we're ready for hybrid working, though we're always open to improvement. Please vote now. We'll leave the poll open for just a short while, and we shall come back to the results shortly. Thanks, Catherine. So on to your presenters this morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. Simon, your background is very much in the workplace, comms and AV, right? So let's start with you, and then we'll go on to Sanjay and Darren.
Correct, yes, absolutely. So I'm Simon Truby. I head up the Workplace Communication Services Division at Ricoh. So we're really looking at driving the technology against the people, influencing that and the user journey around that as well. So I've worked many years in that area and simplifying technology into the workplace.
Thank you, Sanjay. I'm not hearing Sanjay, so he might be on mute.
Schoolboy error, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Sanjay Vada. I'm a transformation services consultant. I've been in IT for over 20 years now, and it's my role to work with our teams, particularly around what we call modern work and security. And for us and for me, it's about understanding that business. It's about understanding their technology investments and then making sure that Ricoh are relevant to them in maximising those. Thank you.
Okay, Darren.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Darren Murphy, and I'm the User Experience Strategy Manager within Ricoh. And my role primarily is to actually look at the user experience within organizations, exactly how they're using technology and how they feel about the technology, and also mapping that to the goals in the business of the organization by also creating that roadmap for the future change.
Okay, thanks, guys. And Darren, you're getting us started, right? Briefly taking us right the way back to March 2020, and then right up to date with the opportunity to reimagine.
Yes, and thanks, Mark. So when we look back at the last 16 months, we've all actually been forced to take part in the largest workforce experiment ever undertaken. And I think previous to this, most organizations would have stated that they had long-term digital transformation strategies. And these were typically based over a 5-year timescale, for example. But actually, due to the pandemic, these swiftly became short-term plans. And we've actually spoken to organizations who had to deliver these within 1 or 2 weeks. Now, these changes have brought about stresses to employees, not only driven by the pandemic, but they're also working longer. You know, we're all spending more time in front of screens. And those with children may actually still be dealing with homeschooling on an ad hoc basis. But what this has actually done is it's allowed organizations to introduce ingenious solutions, such as distance learning in education, online doctor's appointments in surgeries. And we've even worked with a factory where they have one engineer on site who's wearing a camera or smart glasses, and other engineers are working from home, and they're actually carrying out the maintenance that way. Now, when we go into crisis management, there's typically three distinct phases within that. First of all, there's the respond phase, and this is actually a quick, short period of time. It's chaotic activities, but the main aim is to keep the business functions operating and the employees safe. We then actually move into a recovery stage, and this is a slightly longer period, and it's estimated now around 80 to 85% of businesses within the UK are currently in this phase. It's a more organised and coordinated phase with a dedicated focus on actually restoring that scalable business, whilst also identifying the capabilities needed to strengthen, refactor, reopen, rehire, and finally rebudget. We then move on to the renew stage, and this again is a longer period, typically over 1 to 2 years, and it's actually a time to reflect and learn from the previous stages, whilst also identifying new workflows which are repeatable, scalable, and creating that new foundation. So employees have had various different experiences during home working in the last 16 months. And these have ranged from the experienced home worker. These are the people that already had the office space, they had the desk, they had the right technology and the right peripherals, for example. We then move to the chaotic experience. And these include those who's had no dedicated space, not enough technology, had to manage the schoolwork and childcare, and possibly all by working from a kitchen or dining room table. Then we have the isolated experience, and these are typically single people maybe that's got very little of an outside bubble or outside contact, and the actual only communication is through a video screen or mobile phone. And they're probably living in the same space that they're actually working and eating in as well. And then finally, we move into the frontline workers. And these are the key workers that's not been able to work remotely. So these are the people that's had to be at a desk or had to be by the bedside. For example, the engineers keeping the energy going, or the NHS who's kept us safe and well through this. And I think it's more important than ever when creating this hybrid working model that all these experiences are actually taken into consideration. Now, this will actually increase the pressure on IT departments, especially at a time where they may be working with reduced staff, because they'll be used to dealing with that single experience for all employees. And we've actually seen within organizations that there's been a level of disconnect between business leaders and the staff when it comes to actually who's thrived and who's struggled throughout the last 16 months. Now, some of the reasons we've seen for this include issues in collaboration, including the tools used to collaboration, but also the connectivity, areas which may not have that, fast broadband speed, for example. But employees are also missing that personal non-work chat that they get from being within an office. And what we've certainly heard is that a meeting would start with a quick hello, how are you doing? How's your day? Then it'll go into the content of the meeting and then stop as soon as that content's finished. Now, this is primarily due to the amount of time we're spending on video calls, and we don't have that time to actually to take the time out. Now, not being able to unplug is also a big issue with employees. They feel that because they're not visible to management within an office, they've got to answer that email, that text, or that phone call straight away. And they're actually sitting in front of the laptop or PC actually waiting for that. And again, they're sitting with a mobile phone switched on out of hours to actually answer that straight away. And if you look in the press in recent weeks, this has been highlighted quite a few times. And I just want to look at the situation with Apple and their employees. Now, Apple have gone back and said that all employees have to be in an office 3 days a week. And if you actually want to spend more than 14 days within a set period of time, you've got to apply for that. Now, staff have gone back to senior management on this and said that they feel that they've been ignored or unheard in the past 12 months. And they actually state that they're being forced to choose between families' well-being and being empowered to do the job and actually being part of Apple. And this actually mirrors what we're seeing across many verticals and organizations, is this level of disconnect. So you can see by another example of how employees have struggled looking at the data attached. And this has come straight from the WTI report by Microsoft. And you can see that they've seen a 148% increase in team meetings. We've sent over 40.6 billion more emails, as well as increasing that chat and collaboration. Now, organizations need to look at this and how they actually manage employees when working remotely. It's too easy for us all to install that monitoring tool that will tell a manager exactly how long somebody's been sat at the PC, how many emails they've sent, how active they've been, and for that manager to actually go to an employee with negative feedback that they're not working hard enough. And we need to change this, and it needs to be a big change within organizations. And the actual only way we can do that is by increasing that trust between managers and employees. Use these tools to actually identify people that's working too long, spending too much time on the screen, and actually who's at risk from burnout. Simple things, for example, if you realize that your team or a team member is spending lots of times on video calls, change the next team call to a walk-in call by a telephone, for example, or actually introduce relaxed team gatherings, maybe over lunch or over a coffee break. So if we look at the data on the screen here, it clearly shows why employees want to work from an office. They want to work from an office because they feel that it's got the best technology available, the best workspace and the best arrangements. But it's also where they've got the most access and access to people. And those who work from home, it's because they feel that they're more comfortable, more productive, and they're actually avoiding them distractions from the office. And actually, to really enable a true hybrid environment, these actually need to merge into one. So within offices, we need to create that productive collaboration space, but we've also got to provide that quiet, dedicated working space as well. Those working from home should be able to access all the data and processes they need, either via cloud, a VPN collection, or web-based apps. And the technology they require should actually be provided for the job role, or actually the requirements of the job, and not the location where they're working. And in fact, we've seen that a lot of staff feel that they're going to be forced back into an office, actually against their wishes, either due to that lack of equipment or the policies being implemented by the organisation. So now is a time really to ask yourselves, what are the consequences for not getting this right? And what are the actual consequences for not listening to your employees? Well, if we look at the data on the screen, around 41% of the global workforce are actually estimated to be looking at or will be leaving their job in the next 12 months. And if we look at the Gen Z employees, this actually rises to 54%. And the main reason for this is that employees have actually reevaluated what they want, not only from their work life, but their personal lives as well. Simple things like family, well-being, and health are actually now more important than ever. They've seen that they can work remotely. They've been able to manage a child. They've been able to go and do the school run and actually maintain that home line balance. And in fact, Rightmove have seen a 28% increase in people actually relocating or buying houses in rural or coastal locations against the urban ones. And this is primarily due to employees realizing that they no longer need to live within that commuting distance to an office, and they'll actually have that better quality of life. Now, not only does this produce a skills gap within most organizations if they lose these employees, it actually provides a problem to HR at a time where they're actually trying to balance what the future may look like, and that's including changes to policies and work styles. And it may be worth taking into consideration when planning what the future may look like, what the cost to your organization is. What is the cost to actually onboarding new member of staff, including advertisements, time spent on interviews, onboarding and the physical training? And can you actually afford this additional cost? Now, at this stage, I'm just going to bring up the results of the poll, and I believe it's fairly interesting from what we've actually seen. But I also would like to remind you that if you've got any questions or comments about what we're discussing, you can put these in the chat function within there. And I think we're clear from the actual poll within here that most people on the session today actually have a few elements in place for the hybrid work, but there's more to do. And that's probably where we're seeing a lot of organizations as well, that they've started to look at what they need, but they obviously need to put that additional in, whether it's the infrastructure, whether it's the office spaces, or whether it's the technology within there. So it's fairly interesting that maps what we're seeing as well. Thanks, Catherine. So when it comes to hybrid work, most organizations still don't know what it will look for them, and that's clear from the previous slide with the poll. And the reason for this is because we're only actually at the beginning of what the hybrid journey is. If you think about it, for the last 16 months, we've all been working remotely. And previous to this, most of us actually just worked within an office. And I actually think Caroline Everson, who's the vice president of Facebook's global business group, sums it up perfectly. And she stated that, saying that part of the hesitancy is that it's still not clear what kind of model works for the companies. Employees want that more flexibility, but none of us actually have this figured out. And that's the same message that we're actually hearing from organizations. One thing I think is clear is that no business is going to operate the same, however, with hybrid working. And this is not only due to the size of the organization, but the complexity and the accessibility requirements. But one thing we are hearing is that the office space is going to be different. And I think key for organizations to manage this is to build a framework. And this needs to be built around people, places, processes, and technology. Now, firstly, it must start with the people. The employee experience is going to be key and actually will model how the rest of the framework will develop. How are employees going to work when working remotely or working from an office? How is the technology going to work for them and not against them? What works well now? And more importantly for the organization, are you actually consuming your current investments correctly? And more key to this employee experience is going to be the accessibility. And this is so important because the UK government right now actually estimates that 7.7 million people are working in the UK who are not able to actually carry out their daily task or be productive as they are due to some form of disability. And in fact, only around 3% will inform an employer of any disability due to the fear of discrimination, negative feedback, or the fear that they won't get that promotion. And we're not only talking about physical disabilities here or permanent disabilities. And yes, these are important and we need to be able to provide that inclusive environment for these. But we also need to look at temporary ones as well, such as strain injuries, such as muscle pulls, broken bones, cataracts, just to name a few. We then have the situational disabilities, such as accents, noises within the environment or culture. And then finally, we have the hidden ones. And these are people that may be on the autism spectrum. They may have diabetes, cancer patients, or more and more common that we're seeing now is people that may have PTSD from some experience. Now, when we move into places, Simon's going to go into this in a lot more detail shortly. However, we think that when changing the workspace, you need to ensure that the infrastructure behind it is in fact suitable and is able to manage and maintain this new technology. Processes are going to need to be updated. The old traditional bring your own device policy will probably need to be updated into a hybrid working policy. Accessibility policies will need to be written or rewritten. And these all need to actually include new technology and the personal equipment. Security is going to need to be increased to manage these devices. And how are people going to collaborate and what integrations can be made? Now, all this cannot be delivered without that right technology in place. The technology needs to be secure, so all your data and key services are secure within this environment. It needs to be cloud powered, so everybody can actually access the information in the processes, whether they're on site or they're working remotely. And more importantly, it needs to be inclusive and actually accessible for all as well. So moving to a hybrid work model actually means workers will expect a more modern approach from an organization. And that approach is whether they're working from an office or working remotely. And this approach should actually ensure that the services you offer and the technology you provide actually improve the security and compliance for the organization, but more importantly, enhances that user productivity whilst improving collaboration and communication techniques within the organization. So with a move to hybrid work, some traditional office services will no longer be supported or maintained. And it's important to identify what these are now and how they can actually be replaced, updated, or changed before they become obsolete. And when looking at these transformations, organizations need to adjust the way they carry out these. They need to change from a product-led mentality to a project-led mentality. Solutions and applications should be reusable across your organization. They need to be sizable for the department or the job role that's using them. And effectively, they need to become plug and play so they can be used throughout the organization. And I think the illustration on screen highlights how transformation can be project-led rather than the traditional product one. And I've said before that it all should start with the user experience. However, data is now more important within an organization. The right access to the data can speed them decision-making decisions up, but it also gives you that baseline of where you actually are right now. Traditional, when we've discussed security in the past, for example, it's always been about how do we protect the infrastructure. But with the move to the cloud and employees using personal devices, which may not actually be connected to the network, this now needs to involve protecting documentation and file storage as well. And we can do this through containment systems like ransomware containment systems, for example, carrying out regular simulated attacks and vulnerability scanning to actually identify where the gaps are in the network, and ensuring that you've got the right level of accreditation, Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, or ISO 27001. Digitization, taking them physical hand crank processes and documents and making them digital, either through scanned images or Power Apps or document management systems. Storing that documentation after scanning whilst also providing the automated workflows and multiple layers of redundancy. Device as a service as well, reducing that unexpected costly cost for an organization by changing to a predictable cost per user per device model, allowing IT departments to actually provide the right device for all users. And then finally, the cloud adoption, understanding what your current infrastructure and storage utilization is and how that can be migrated to either a full cloud or hybrid cloud model, whilst also ensuring that key business continuity across all services. And if we look at what the experts are saying, then spend by organizations on technology such as device as a service will actually double in the next 12 to 24 months. This is actually at a time when IT execs are actually seeing a decline in budgets due to the cost of the pandemic. However, they're also expecting to get new budget alignments due to the changes in the office from the physical to virtual. And the biggest way that they're actually looking at saving money is moving from traditional finance models to a more predictable cost per user per month model. And more organizations are becoming aware of the need to improve the inclusivity of the workforce. And this includes a spend on assistive technologies. Now, if we look at security, this is probably the most worrying stat on there. The 63% of security breaches were actually discovered by people and not technology in the past 4 months. Now, this presents two key questions. Do you actually know how secure your network, your data and documents are? And do you know what unauthorized practices or workarounds your employees are carrying out and why they're doing this? And finally, we see there about the training. And the interesting thing about this is that in the last 5 years in the work we've carried out, training has always been an issue for employees. And it's not the level or the detail of the training provided by organizations, it's the actual delivery method. Now, not everybody can actually learn from a PDF or from a PowerPoint presentation or a video. So it's key for organizations to understand how to deliver that training for the right users. But what is worrying is that only 28% of employees on this survey said that they've received any sort of training for working remotely or hybrid work. So as we saw from the poll, some organizations have actually started this journey to hybrid work, but there is a lot of organizations that still haven't. And if you have started that journey, now's the time to take that step back to identify if you've implemented the right technology and have you actually involved your employees in the process. If you have started, key to understanding this is listening to your employees, Understand how employees worked previously, how they're working now, what can be improved. If they're actually looking forward to returning to the office, how they see themselves using the office, and actually what scares them about that return to the office, whilst also understanding how they can manage documents and storage. We then have the accessibility, ensuring that you provide the right inclusive environment needed for all users. And then finally, looking at the utilization of your current licenses and actually, are you getting the best for what you're paying for? And this is where Rico can help you through the hybrid work accelerator analysis. This allows us to speak to your employees, understand what they need, help you create that framework, and actually help you create the hybrid work environment. What I'm going to do now is thank you for your time this morning. Is pass over to Sanjay, and he's going to discuss a little bit more around the technology.
Thanks, Darren. You know what? Darren and I speak to a lot of customers almost on a daily basis, and it's crystal clear to us that there is no single standard or blueprint for hybrid work. So every organization's approach has to be different to meet the unique needs of their people. And the research tells us that in the vast majority of employees say they want more flexible remote work options, but at the same time, they also say they want more in-person collaboration post-pandemic. And just by the nature of who we are, we're tribal, we're social. So we want to engage in person with our colleagues. We want to make that small talk and really understand them. What's important to them? Talk about families, talk about pets, talk about holidays. And look, and it's more and more difficult to do in this way as we're doing now, using collaboration devices. But in essence, how do we accommodate both of these? So hybrid work represents the biggest shift to how we work in our generation. It's a fantastic time now, but you've got to err on the side of caution here. You don't want to be left behind. It's going to require a new operating model which spans people, places, processes, and will of course have an impact on technology that will need to be an enabler. But the shift to hybrid work is not just about working remotely. It's a pivotal moment that requires asking new questions. What should be done remotely? When and how do we bring people back to the workplace safely? How do we empower everyone to thrive when people are working from home, in the office or at a work site, and everywhere in between? How will we adapt as every business process and customer interaction becomes digital? How do we make hybrid work work? The transition to hybrid work right now is a strategic golden opportunity for every organization. And look, we've touched on it before, but one that requires a new operating model. Every leader will need a strategy to activate the whole organization in the move to gain competitive advantage and address the urgent opportunity right now. So from HR to IT, from marketing and sales to manufacturing, every function will need to come together to reimagine how to empower employees, engage customers better, optimize operations, and transform products and services to ensure all solutions enhance productivity. The shift to hybrid work gives business leaders a rare opportunity to transform key business processes in bold new ways. If you're thinking of the next few months simply as a return to the office, you're missing the big picture. Instead, take some time to identify and prioritize digital transformation processes that leverage and scale what you've learned over the last year. If you don't, your competitors will be. Every business process will be impacted by the move to hybrid, and every business function will need to transform. And again, Darren's touched on it previously, but one area that is of significant importance is security. So as corporate networks are suddenly without firm borders, this is also changing our approach, and we have to reevaluate our security postures. The threat landscape has never been more complex or challenging, and security has never been more critical. So whatever the technology investment, make sure it enables people and gives them a consistent user experience that doesn't hinder them. Make sure there is good synergy between working from home, working remotely, and working at the office. Do they have the correct technology set up? Can they easily communicate? Can they access all the data they need to be able to do their jobs? And is the device capable of supporting their needs? So wherever the work takes place, the processes should be seamless. It should not be two different experiences. It's important to remember that hybrid work is new. No one has really done this before. We will learn lessons and adapt as we continue on our journey. In summary, we need to bridge the gap between the physical and digital and adapt with employee needs and ensure that hybrid work is a positive and progressive evolution. Thank you. I'm now going to hand across to Simon.
Thank you, Sanjay. And I think actually just building on what Sanjay and Darren have said is obviously that there is some key stakeholders and teamwork is key within that area because, you know, within the workplace itself, you know, facilities, HR, IT, finance, and all other departmental managers are the ones that are really looking for the solution, and every decision within each of those departments impacts the others. So teamwork, working through, you know, any kind of strategy within the workplace is really, really key to making sure that the objective is achieved. And, you know, the objective is every employee that's going to use a workplace really should be able to achieve their full potential. And that's whether that's remote working or obviously within the work setting itself, the office setting. And the key thing obviously is, you know, there is always that business drive for the finance department to be able to create a you know, a viable solution and proposition and be able to monitor and map that as a way forward. So we're seeing a lot of driving that area to justify where we are today to where we're going to as a working practice. If we could move to the next slide. Okay, and we've mentioned obviously about the collaboration capabilities within that. It's a critical thing to have, you know, the ability to collaborate with tool sets that means that everybody's justified in the way that they can communicate, that the decisions about where to work from on a daily basis is achievable. You know, in terms of internal communications, you know, what is the what is the strategy around that? What is the key driver and technology that you want to do, and therefore what do you need to build around that from the technology side of it? So it's both the infrastructure and platform that you want to enable for your users, but also what does that look like when they travel to different places? I think one of the first things that happened as everybody reacted, everybody reacted to moving to home and then communicating in different platforms, and a lot of organisations, a lot of our customers made a decision at that point as a reaction to where they were in their own personal journey in terms of unified communications, but also what was achievable straight away. And that may not be the right solution now. So it's really about creating a strategy going forward about the right platform for internally being able to collaborate with the tools that offer the best solution for that. The other thing that we've seen as well is that because remote working has been an acceptable workplace, I think the drive now is obviously making sure that the technology that supports that and the understanding in terms of etiquette and surroundings within that personal workplace is also key as well, and that's going to drive remote working into the hybrid world, but then also into the office as well, and making sure the tool sets are correct for when you do happen to have that face-to-face piece, but also expanding out into remote work as being involved in that. And as a subset of that is obviously the external piece. How do you communicate with your external partners, whether they be clients or partners or supply chain, and whether actually the platform that you're using internally matches that of the external as well. Collaboration tools can be different depending on who you want to work with, and actually it needs to be flexible enough to support all. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a single solution to be able to do that. It's about how does the workflow and the working practices make it easy enough to make sure that the objective is achieved, and that is reaching your full potential in collaborating with external parties or internal parties and bringing them all together into that collaboration environment. If we can move on to the next slide. And that really drives us into what does the workplace experience mean? We've been working on this for many, many years, and as everybody, as Darren and Sanjay have mentioned, everybody's at a different stage, and there's not one solution that fits all. But actually, the technology within the workplace is driving in several ways. There is obviously the enablement technology, the ability to then use the workplace as a technology with technology that gains the users their key deliverables in that space. Why do people want to come to them? Well, as Darren said, is the best technology and the easiest use for them to be able to achieve their goals. But also there's the impersonal piece that comes around that as well. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that there is an empowerment that means that the journey starts from home. It doesn't have to start when you reach the workplace. And so we start looking at technologies like desk, room, and space booking to make sure that you have the ability to guarantee that you're going to have a comfortable environment. You're going to have the space that you need to be able to work in the practice and what you're doing on a task base. And we're seeing a lot of decisions made around how does that work. Traditionally, we've always looked at that as a control piece, but now it's actually an enabler. It's a way to drive control over access, but actually the individual being able to guarantee that they've got space and space to achieve the task that they want, whether that be a face-to-face meeting or being able to have a desk, which means that they can flow between those face-to-face meeting room type meetings where you're collaborating and being creative, and then going back to your desk to achieve another task, because not one user does one type of style of working in one day. And the other thing that comes from that space booking is the user journey piece of it. So as I said, it works from home. So being able to access that remotely and be able to guarantee it is a key part of the journey. It means that you know where you're going and you know what to expect when you arrive at your workplace. And it gives comfort in that as well. The other thing is actually driving that creativity means that you can drive which work groups are there with you. Can you see your colleague and which office they're going into on a particular day, and make sure that you're there to be able to have those impersonal visits. And also where we're seeing trends within workplace in terms of the working week has changed, where, as Darren said, there is different members that are looking to 1 or 2 days a week, which means that you're going to have busy days within your workplace. And then how do you flex that? Do you empower everybody to be able to be accessible in every space? Or do you say on a Friday afternoon or a Friday daytime where it's going to be slightly quieter, let's reduce the workplace that's bookable so that actually we increase collisions, the in-person collisions that create creativity within the workforce. As we move around the space, you've then got, what does that actually look in terms of space utilization and some real-time occupancy reporting? Now, again, this traditionally has been a bit of a control piece. It's looking at actuals. But what's quite interesting about that is the actuals will give you an understanding of what the trends are within your workplace. But also what it will do is when you start looking at the desk booking side of it, or the space booking side of it against those actuals in utilization, that's where you get some real insights as to why people are making decisions. What does that mean? And how do you drive the right working spaces because of it? So does that mean that actually you need the same open plan floor where you have lots of desks anymore? Or actually are you looking for people looking to go into smaller spaces or meeting rooms to be able to collaborate and do what they want to do in the new working area? And that's a drive that's going to go forward. We've spoken to a lot of facilities teams, and they've actually driven now that they understand the workplace is not a fixed space and not a fixed design anymore. It's never finished. It's always going to be evolving, and that's what we're seeing with technology enabling that capability going forward. Now, obviously, to collaborate and do that as well, there's sometimes you'll bring in externals. So visitor management is becoming more critical about ensuring a safe environment. How do you manage to invite people to their workplace and bring them in? And that does tie into how do you book a space and make sure that you've got everybody that you're going to have attend there. But it's also actually, as I said, the journey starts from outside of the office. So visitor management systems drive the ability to create a COVID safe area, create that self-certification capability, but may also work alongside digital signage and wayfinding capabilities to maybe offer a virtual receptionist, reducing the interactions on a personal level at the front of house, but also enabling more information going to those externals that may be coming in as a visitor. And that really does drive what we say is the persona of your company. That's the experience that people have from an external point of view of the workplace. And that's going to be critical going forward, because it's going to happen slightly less, obviously, because people are being in this hybrid working and really going to be traveling when it makes sense to do so on what is the real reason for traveling. So when you want them to come in, you want them to be fully informed, know exactly what they're doing, reduce anxiety because of that, but also drive it through technology to be able to enable them to really go to where they need to go efficiently and be safe in doing so. And obviously where they're landing is going to be meeting room or meeting space type technologies. So one of the things we are seeing is a drive for simplification of technology within the office. There is a demand, obviously, if you have a meeting room now, people are so used to previously collaborating face to face where the majority were traveling into the office, to now not generally setting where people are going to be coming into a collaboration session from. So where I was talking about the intent versus actuals previously, what you'll find is that you may book a meeting room for a particular session, but you can't guarantee that everybody's going to be there. And so you need the technology within the meeting rooms to simplify, be simple and active, to be able to bring externals into that type of a collaboration or meeting type session, and not necessarily define that they have to be there in that meeting room, because the decisions that people are making are based on a number of other things, which include the other work that they've got to do that day. It might be social reasons, as we said before, about running children to school, which might then change the working practice during that day. And it may be on a daily basis that they have to do that. So within the meeting room, simplifying technology so that you can join your chosen platforms is really, really critical in that. And actually making them simple, because you may not be going into the office as often as possible. So you don't want long training sessions to be able to utilize the meeting room. And you also don't want it to be so complex that you waste 10 minutes at the beginning of that session being able to connect to your session. The idea of a single touch join type collaboration system, which means you can join your chosen platform almost immediately, really does drive the efficiency within the meeting room spaces, and will drive people wanting to go to the office because of that. Because they know that that's the best technology. It's going to be the best audio quality. It's going to be the best video quality and the simplest to use to collaborate. And that may even include other collaboration type technologies like digital whiteboarding, and really driving through documents in a digital manner, which means that all sees and all can collaborate on the same technology. Other areas of the office, obviously smart lockers, is really about workflow, and it's about how do you simplify now the process where users aren't in the office or potentially aren't in the office every day anymore, but still need access to IT support, IT peripherals, or other services as well. And bringing in other technologies such as smart lockers really does drive that type of utilization, where you can now offer a 24/7 type approach where people are so used to now with remote purchases at home, being able to go to a locker and collect what they need. So a service ticket might look very, very different in the future, and we have a number of clients that are looking at that as a process and a workflow. That means that actually once your service ticket is qualified, you go with a code and collect what you need from a locker because it's already there waiting for you in a remote office where potentially IT doesn't need to be there to support you anymore. And that's really driving that workflow as well. And off the back of that, obviously, we have the hybrid working environment. And we've mentioned about unified communications and collaboration and what that looks like in the meeting room. But actually, just in general, in your workspace and the work floor, what does that look like now? And I think because everybody has been working remotely and has transferred their meetings into almost a workflow of meeting after meeting during the day, or in a number of different sessions where it's acceptable to then jump on a call with another participant. You may not have a meeting room for every single solution, every single time that you do that, because it may be that you're the remote worker, even though you're in the workspace. But what does that look like from the floor plan? And what we are seeing is a number of our clients and actually in the industry as well, that open plan workspaces where traditionally they may have been just general telephone calls that are being taken at sporadically during the day, have now become a space where people are joining these type of calls on a regular basis because they'll have individual one-to-ones, there'll be the remote participant in a collaboration session. And so really the technology within the workspace, both from the physical fit out, but also technology potential within that space to create maybe some sound masking or quiet zones, which means that you can really task-based, based on, as Darren said, what you want to do within those spaces and be flexible within that. So actually, if you have a bank of desks where there may be 6 or 7 people joining a conference call or various different conference calls, that becomes quite noisy. And so technology can solve that with sound masking, which really does reduce the transfer of audio across those spaces as well. So that's the capability that we have from technology within the workspace. And there was a whistle-stop tour of what a workspace looks like, but it gives you an overview of lots of different areas that affect both as we said, the facilities teams, the HR teams in terms of setting and managing and reporting, the finance teams in terms of where their investment's going into there. Everything affects the IT team from a technology perspective, because obviously we're integrating now on an IoT type approach to all the technologies. And actually as managers and team leaders, they all really want to get together and make sure that they're getting the most out of bringing their people into the office, because studies in the market show that actually people work longer if they're not traveling. So why do you travel into the office? Well, it's that collaboration and making sure that you're utilizing the space to really drive those objectives. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Simon. In fact, thanks very much to all 3 presenters. As I mentioned at the start, there's an awful lot to address on the topic of hybrid working, and that's really about as far as we can go today. So we're just about to pause here and conclude part 1, but don't leave us just yet, as there have been a few questions that have come in. Before we get to those questions, just let me remind you that part 2 of the hybrid working webinar will run in 2 weeks' time on the 1st of July, when we'll be joined by a special guest speaker. Robert Epstein from Microsoft, but you will need to register again for this second webinar if you haven't done so already. Sanjay, what do you think those joining us on the 1st of July can expect to hear?
I think Mark, so Robert is well known to us. He's supported us in a number of client sessions over the years, and also some internal sessions as well. And what Robert is, he's essentially the point person for hybrid strategy for Microsoft in the UK. So I'm sure he's going to come on, and he's going to talk about the technology, right? But also leadership, culture, and change management. So it's a really interesting time. There's some great information and resources out there. So it's definitely going to be a session that people will want to register for.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, I've enjoyed listening to you three, but I'm looking forward to the 1st of July already. Okay, so let's move on to the Q&A. Let's have a look at those questions. The first one is from Fiona. Fiona, thanks for your question. Really interesting. Given the COVID limitations, how do you carry out the analysis of an organisation's requirements? Darren, I think that's probably best for you.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. We've talked all the way through this session about how organisations need to change, and we've actually changed the way that we actually carry out the analysis now. And primarily, the first thing that we do is through a digital survey. So this can be easily sent out to all employees, either via email or through a QR code on the intranet. This is then, we can then follow this up through a series of workshops or one-to-one interviews. And again, these are now carried out remotely using Teams. Now, we've got a lot of new functions within Teams, such as the breakout rooms, and we've also got the whiteboard function within there. So it allows us to carry out the workshops on Teams exactly the same as what we do in a face-to-face environment. So it's all very much now done remotely. It's all very safe, and it stops that unnecessary travel as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Darren. There's another question from Steve. Thank you, Steve. We've invested in numerous technology solutions, but adoptions by certain groups of employees has been limited. Sanjay, I think that's probably one for you to pick up.
Thanks, Steve. Great question. And again, as Darren has touched on, I guess through the process that we follow and go through with our customers, I think the stat is 27% of IT projects fail because of the lack of adoption of the technology. So again, touching on the people side of this, people need to see what's in it for them. So it's that question, well, if you want me to use this, what's in it for me? So it's about taking people on the journey. It's understanding how they utilize that technology. And again, we've touched on it, collaboration. It's about looking at the data. It's about informed decision making. And then once we've baselined that right at the beginning, it's then a continuation just through continuous service improvement. So we can hopefully see that the adoption and consumption of that technology is rising.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I've got another question here from Kaz. Thank you, Kaz. Quickly, how do we address accessibility for so many different types of employee within the organisation? Dan, I think that's something that you started to touch on when you were presenting.
Yeah, and again, another great question. And there's two steps to this. Firstly, there needs to be a cultural change within the organisation. You need to look and address and appoint inclusion and well-being champions who people that actually have these disabilities can actually feel that they can go and talk to them. They feel that they'll be listened to and actually feel that what they need is actually taken on board. The second stage is actually identifying what changes need to be made. And it may just be simple changes, simple things to websites, for example, to presentations, or actually providing that additional technology within there as well. So there's a two-stage approach, but it's all around that culture first and the change in the culture.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Okay, just trying to keep it within the hour. Just maybe look at one more question. I've got a question here from Mike. You've spoken about data as an enabler, but will that mean that we will need to have additional resources to interpret the data? And tell us what that means. Simon, I think that's probably one for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, that's a very, very, very good question. Actually, that's I think that's really the strategy in designing the technology for work workplace and the approach, as Sanjay and Darren have said as well. Data can come from everywhere. So it's not a single point of view. It is coming from surveys. It's coming from technology within the workplace. And really what it does is, evolve into an informed decision. And every decision has an element of emotion in there, obviously, but the more data that you drive into it, actually enables a better decision, a more productive decision that can show a return on that. And I think the thing is that what we talk about is a data journey. It's really about a strategy around what you want to achieve at different points in your strategy. And it might be, and actually we recommend to a certain extent, is having a plan for the initial amount of data that you want to achieve, because if you take too much data in too much, then it does become a workload, an overview. But actually from the technologies that we're driving, and certainly within the workplace, we look for solutions that offer the right type of reporting back. So actually interpreting the data is almost done for you. The offer of what you want to get out of it, and maybe having even some artificial intelligence drive those reports and suggestions out the back of the technology we're suggesting, really does enable you not to be a data wizard or have an analyst that's driving it, but really give you an informed decision from the start. As you get further down that journey, obviously, and you build on that, then those reports may change. And as the workplace evolves, that will change. But the key thing is that you plan that data journey and what level of reporting you want coming back from the data to enable you to make decisions going forward. It is the critical thing. And what you're doing is you're investing today for what you want to get out of it tomorrow, and being able to evolve with the changing working practices. So that's a very good question, and it is part of the journey.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that data will give you an early heads up of what changes are happening around the workplace. Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, guys, for answering those questions. Thank you for presenting. Thank you for those that submitted the questions. Our time is just about up. So thank you for joining the webinar. I'm glad you were able to take part in the questions and taking part in the poll. Looking forward to see you on the 1st of July. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.